So thank you everyone for joining in today. Welcome back to another session of In the Loop webinar series. I'm pleased to be here with you today on this sunny Thursday here in Brooklyn, New York. My name is Hayato Nishi. I am currently the PR manager at Shima Seiki U.S.A. I've been with the organization for a little over 7 years now. And right now I'm handling PR management to really promote the usage of whole garment knitting in the US, as well as our APEX design system and APEXFiz as a digitalization tool in our industry. For those that are joining us for the first time today, I'd like to briefly just give a brief overview on what In the Loop entails. In the Loop, generally, we started in early 2020 after the outbreak because trade shows, exhibitions, meetings were canceled or postponed. So we just really wanted to create a way to connect with our customers remotely and digitally during these crucial times. In the past, we've mainly covered updates and announcements, customer stories, as well as sample showcases. And based off of the feedback that we've received, we decided to showcase this session around our APEXFiz software. And so a couple notes to give a heads up on before we start our session. Please just make sure that you have a stable internet connection so that we could have a smooth session. I apologize in advance if we do have any technical difficulties on our end. It seems like it may be lagging on the camera right now, but hopefully that'll be resolved as we go along. We also have the chat section open, so please feel free to put in your comments, questions, and things like that in the chat section, and we will be getting back to that at the end of the session. Lastly, after the webinar closes, we do have a survey at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned and fill in those questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So, yep, without further ado, I'd like to get started on In the Loop session for today. First off, we'll just highlight some of the topics of discussion for today. First off, we'll go over some overall global knit trends and current problems in the industry. I'll give a brief highlight on the APEX design system. Then we'll go into APEXFiz. We'll showcase the APEXFiz and its capabilities. After that, we'll go into some customer stories, highlighting some companies using APEX and how they're utilizing it to digitize their designs. And lastly, we'll just close off with some highlights from Shima Seiki U.S.A, Shima Seiki Europe, as well as some other updates and announcements at the end. So first off, we'll just start off with some current industry problems that we're seeing in the industry right now. Overall, previously, working conditions were considered one of the prominent issues in the industry. A lot of companies have focused on sustainable materials and recycled materials, but social sustainability still remains a problem with overcrowding, minimum wages, and child labor. Post-pandemic, another threat really began to take hold, which is factory closures. This can be either from temporary breakouts, as well as termination of businesses from all these canceled orders. In addition, with less travelers and operating aircrafts, we've also seen shipping surcharges where prices of shipment increased, as well as shortages in freight cargoes, which led to increase in shipment prices, as well as longer lead times in shipments. Post-COVID, we've also seen that retail stores have either closed their stores temporarily or permanently due to these pandemics. And due to this, many inventories were left over, leading to more warehousing. And with these issues, brands really had to shift the way they began to manufacture their clothing to efficiently reduce their costs. But at the same time, many offices were closed, and so many of the designers had to work remotely from home. which required a lot of the mills and factories to ship a lot of the developments, swatches, yarn reelings, whatnot, all to the individual designers' homes. This ultimately increased the carbon footprint and the amount of physical samples that are needed to be shipped back and forth. From there, a huge topic right now is digitalization. So if those designers wanted to digitize those physical swatches and things like that, they would need to take photos or scan in those physical materials in order to begin digitizing design. However, this process, again, requires the physical materials, is time consuming, and requires a lot of that physical sampling waste. And so with all these in mind, I'd like to switch gears to share with you APEX-4. APEX-4 is our Shima design system, which was initially developed in 1981. NASA was originally selling off 3 of their motherboards, one which went to Apple, one which came to us, third one we're not sure where it went. But based off of this, we've developed on our graphics performance, and due to its superior performance, this was really used in a lot of other industries in the 80s, such as the automotive industry, as well as advertising industries. And by culminating this experience and know-how, we've continuously improved on this design system for over 40 years, and is slowly but surely becoming a standard for digitizing apparel design today. Next, I'd briefly just like to cover APEXFiz. APEXFiz is a new software version of the APEX design system, but we've kind of divided it into different tiers based off of user level. So here you can see a chart that goes over everywhere from Design Junior to Design Pro. Design Junior is just for basic designers who want to create very basic jersey swatches. Design Standard is for anyone that wants to do print design as well as embroidery. Design Knit is specifically for flat knit designers as well as circular knit designers. Design Weave is for woven and towel designers. And Design Pro is for what we call our super users or advanced users that can take on all those different capabilities above. And from Design Standard to Design Pro, we also offer the option of adding on a 3D option. So I've given you a brief breakdown of the APEXFiz, but without further ado, I'd like to take this time to welcome our guest speaker for today's session. I would like to welcome Miss Lucy Whitehouse. She'll be joining us from the UK office today. Hi, Lucy, how are you doing?
Hi, Hayate, I'm good, thank you.
Great, great. Would you mind giving the audience a little background about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Lucy Whitehouse, and I'm one of the APEX design specialists here at Shima Seiki Europe. I work with retailers, sourcing offices, designers, manufacturers, and yarn spinners to support the implementation of Shima Seiki's virtual sampling software into new and existing workflows. My previous experience as a designer has given me first-hand experience of some of the obstacles within the industry, so I really appreciate the positive impact that Shima Seiki software has for businesses across the sector.
Great, great. Yeah, thank you so much for joining in again today, and I think we'd like to just get started on showcasing the audience a little bit about our APEXFiz.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
So I'm going to introduce the key functions of the software and how they're being used in the industry, and hopefully it'll give you a broad overview of the software. However, if you'd like a personalised demonstration, then please just contact myself or Hayatu or your nearest agent. The first function I'm going to be demonstrating today is the colour variation tool. This is used by designers to update colours of a product that sold well one season with next season's colours without having to get samples done to decide if the new colours work. The designer just needs to make sure they have a good quality photo to start with. We just use one from our phone, find that fine. We then use the tools of the top software to divide up the image into the colours we want to change. And now we can load new colours onto that. I've used the colour picker here, or I could use the Panto menu or a Chroma pen menus, which are both preloaded into the software. Or I could select from a pre-made colour palette. Now that I've got my colours, the Apex can now render those so easily onto the image instead of needing to adjust the colours manually by changing the hue or saturation. Another tool that's really useful is the auto colorway function. This takes a pre-made colour palette for a season, say, and automatically works out the combinations and permutations of those colours onto the new product. So for these 15 that I've got in this generalized menswear palette, you can see that the Apex have calculated that I have over 500 different options for this season's colour palette. This colorway function works well across product as well. So it's not just used within the knitwear industry, but it can be used for print samples or shoes, as I'm going to show you in a second. So it can be used on any product you want as long as you have a good quality photo of it. These images look so realistic that we even have customers use them to make colorways of the product for their e-commerce platforms as well. Some designers even use it to recolor print swatches for next season. So to do this, I'm going to start by taking a scan, or it could just be a photo of the swatch. And I'm going to start by finding the repeat. So I'm going to specify 3 points because this is a half drop repeat. And then I'm going to recolor it as we did in the previous photo. The other really valuable part of creating colorways using this function is the color information is all stored in that one file, so it can be outputted by the new image, reducing the likelihood of the color being miscommunicated through operational error from it being written out manually. The final function of the colorway tool that I want to show you is the material change tool. For print designers, this is a great tool as it allows them to assess their design, whether that's last season's swatch or a new artwork on different fabrics. I've done this and I've taken the colorway file and now selected a new fabric from the library. I've chosen a washer fabric here, but equally, if I wasn't happy with this, I could experiment with, say, a seersucker fabric, all without actually having to produce a sample. We're now going to look at yarn. So Shima Seiki's virtual sampling software is well known for its realistic knit simulations. And of course, its woven simulations. And the basis of all this is the virtual yarn that it's constructed from. There are hundreds of preloaded yarns in the APEX library. However, say you have a yarn from a trade show and you would like to see it digitalized. To do this, we first scan the yarn on a yarn fixing device, which I have here, which is used to scan the yarn on a white background and then a black background to make sure the scanner picks up as much detail as possible. These images are then combined, which means the yarn is cut out from the background and it's ready to add to our yarn library. The APEX system has 2 yarn libraries. One is for wovens and one is for knit. So to start with, we'll enter it into the knit library. I enter the type of yarn just so I know, well, just so that the APEX knows how the yarn should behave when knitted. I also give it a name and enter the yarn count if I know it. I'm then going to click check, and this will give me a virtual swatch where I can evaluate the end use by playing around with the gauge or the number of ends used. For weave designers, we could enter it into the wovens library using a similar process, only now I can experiment with the density and the type of weave by changing it from a plain to a twill and so on. Now that we have our yarn, we'll start to look at the fabrics we can create with this. So we're going to look at weave next. And we'll look at some of the further weave functions the system has to aid the designer to create virtual samples. Say you have a concept board at the start of a season, such as this, and a buyer is asked to see a number of stripes or checks using that concept board. This Kaleido tool is a great starting point to create designs intuitively from an original image. Here I am sliding this dotted line over the screen, and the system is creating stripe distributions from the colours of the concept board automatically. These designs can be sent straight through to the Weave Edit, where I can denote the number of colours I wish to use and the density of the weave. I'll now adjust the colour distributions of the check manually. So say I wasn't quite happy with the initial one, I can adjust it manually in here using the Weave Edit function. Or I could edit the type of weave, for example, as well. So we also have a weave library that I can select from, and there's hundreds of different structures in there, all of which are fully editable. So you're not limited to the number at all, because you can create your own from scratch. If you've got a weave design that you use often, this can be saved and reloaded from the pattern menu. This allows to adjust patterns that worked well previously and update the colours or adjust the scale without having to request new samples. Once we're happy, we can combine our check and structure with the digitalised yarn data to create a realistic woven swatch and output it in multiple colourways and yarn variations. The Weave Edit function can also be used to take an artwork into a jacquard. For example, here I've changed this artwork into a structure jacquard, and the Apex has already recommended structures that would work best to make the design tonal. If I'm not happy with that, I can adjust the colour by clicking on the colour chips to see what would work best on the warp and the weft. Or I can edit parts of the structure manually as well. If I'm not happy with this structure design and say I want to try it as a colour jacquard instead, so I can't get it quite right within the structure design, I could then do it as a colour jacquard virtually as well and create multiple colour variations of that, or without having to use any physical resource. Here I've made multiple tests and have produced highly realistic samples that can be used in buying meetings, trend prediction, before a sample is made. Okay, so that's some of the basic functions of Weave, and now we'll look at knit. We can create jacquards virtually, knitted jacquards virtually, and it's actually very similar to the way that we created Weave. We can just change the artwork into graph data in a few clicks. First, I've compressed the vector data into the number of colours, in this case 5. But for fabric quality purposes, we need to have it as a 3-colour. We can combine some of the colours to instantly create a 3-colour like so. Now I'm going to do a gauge change where we specify the course and wale count. So whether you've got a pre-existing wash swatch that you're taking the course and wale count to, or whether you're just using an estimated one from the system, the type of backing and the resulting size, and the image will be converted into stitches. In this case, I've done it in 6 gauge. And you can see that each dot equals 1 stitch. Now, if I think the detail needs to be finer, we can simply redo the gauge change tool, and at a touch of a button, I've now got it in 14 gauge. This can then be sent to the factory as a Shima file or a bitmap file for sampling, or we can create a virtual sample right at our desk. If it's structure or stripe that you want to create, this can be done as well. We first start by creating a loop file, which is our virtual knit file. And then we use the stripe tool to add stripes within the software. I'm working here in centimeters, but if I wanted to work in inches or rows, I could just as easily do that. I'm going to add color. I'm going to add it from the Pantone menu. Again, I could add it from the Chroma menu or just using the color picker. And keep on editing my stripe until I'm happy with it and putting it into repeat if I need to. Once I'm happy with my stripe, we can start to add structure in the loop edit menu. As you can see, this gives us a low-res simulation of a single jersey swatch with a 2x2 rib. I'll then use the pattern library to add some structure. The pattern library contains over 1,500 different structures preloaded into it, all of which are fully editable, so you're not limited to that number at all, and you can create your own structures from scratch. However, if you're not familiar with creating structures, it's easy to make unique structure design without using the pattern library. As you'll see, on one side of the screen, I've got this red and green data. That's actually the programming data, and it's updated in real time. So when I update my low-res simulation, that programming data will be updated as well. And this provides a brilliant starting point for the programmer, as they're not having to try and work it out from just a swatch, a bought swatch from a retailer. You can see how easy it is to create a new structure without having to know the programming detail. I'm now going to simulate this with the yarn and demonstrate the high quality output we get when it's virtually knitted with that digitalized yarn. You'll notice that this yarn wasn't the one that I created earlier. This is one from our Yarn Bank platform. Yarn Bank is an online catalogue of actual digitalized yarn from spinners all over the world. This is just a snapshot of some of them on here. But it's growing all the time, so we really recommend that you go on and have a look yourself, as it changes every day. The method I used to find this yarn in the simulation was to search by gauge, and then it's filtered it into this selection of 150 different yarn books. This was a UPW one that I used. As you can see, it's just like that, looking at an actual swatch card, only this has never been actually knitted. The yarn has been scanned in, and then it's been virtually knitted using the APEX software. And I can view all the information that I'd normally get with the yarn swatch card as well, and I can contact the spinner through Yarn Bank if needed. It's completely free of charge to use for designers, so we really recommend that you go in and just sign up to it to have a look. It's really easy for me to then create multiple colorways and yarn variations right at my desk with that yarn from Yarn Bank that I can source for production. Once I've created my swatches, we're now going to move on and look at how we can use a pre-existing photo to put it onto a product with a similar shape to create a new product with our new structure. So this is called 2.5D mapping, and it's what we're going to move on to next. I start by cutting the product out from the background and dividing it up into layers. As you can see, I've already done here. And then I've applied a mesh to each of those different layers so that when I apply my new swatch, the Apex software understands the direction of the fabric and how I want it to lie on the pre-existing photo. Once this has been done, we're ready to add our new swatches. This technique is used for buying and product development meetings to compare and contrast structure, colour and yarn on product instead of actual samples. So you can see how easy it is to compare and contrast different types of structure or different types of colour in this case without requesting that sample. Just like the colorway tool I showed you at the beginning, it doesn't just apply to knitwear. It can be used across different types of product to map on print, embroidery, wovens, like is shown here. However, if you've got that virtual swatch in repeat and you want to use it in 3D for cut and sew, these could equally be exported and used within other 3D software that is specialised for cut and sew. However, for 3D knit, we recommend using our own 3D software as it is specialist to the industry and is based on years of Shima Seiki expertise in knitwear production and produces the most realistic virtual samples, which I'm going to show you now. So to create these virtually knitted garments, I start by choosing a basic shape and editing that using the basic measurement table, like you would fill out for any knitted garment, as I'm doing here. The Apex then produces a flat pattern that is virtually sewn as it would be done for any linked garment. We'll then look at this on a 3D avatar, which can be created in the system, or an OBJ could be imported, or an Albanon body could be imported as well. And we'll dress it to the model, denoting the desired gauge information, so that would give me the cloth characteristics, and then this will be draped on the body. Because it's in 3D, it's easier to evaluate how it looks on the body, and we can decide whether it needs further adjustment, such as lengthening the body length or adding an extra trim. In this case, I'm going to add a frill to the front of the body. I'm going to specify where I want to put that trim first, and then create a new pattern piece and specify the length and the depth of that. And then I'll finally sew it to the front of the body. Now I've done that, it's now ready for me to dress onto the model for us to again compare to the original. We can then lay them side by side virtually and evaluate them both next to each other, which we can then decide which one we want to take further into the design process with no sample necessary. The structure, gauge and yarn can all be experimented with without having to request a sample or take up precious resources. When it does come to a sample, Apex virtual design software can be used to greatly enhance the tech pack as well, by giving the technician much more detailed information to make the sample, from a virtual prototype, the measurement table, a pattern shape, stripe layout, and yarn details. And the best thing is, if the factory are also using Shima machinery, all of this info can be shared using the same file types. So to sum up, if the designer was to send a traditional tech pack with a basic measurement table and a quick sketch, often it would take a number of repetitions for the designers to receive a sample they wanted. This leads to longer lead times and sample wastage, whereas by creating virtuals at their desk, this is much less likely to happen, minimizing lead time and facilitating communication. Thank you so much for your time today. I know I've crammed a lot into this demo, but I hope it gives you a good overview of what the system is capable of and the possibilities of how it could work. So now that you've seen that general overview, I'm going to hand you back to Hayatu and we'll begin to discuss how the software is being currently used in industry.
Great, yes. Thank you so much again, Lucy. I think we covered a lot on the APEXFiz. I hope the audience had a time to digest a lot of that information. I think we do have a few questions coming in, which we'll get to later.
That's great.
But yeah, we'll kind of go into customer stories just to highlight some companies are utilizing the APEX. So first off, I'd like to highlight DC Group. DC Group is a full-service apparel manufacturer in New York, Shanghai, and Beijing, specializing in designing and sourcing knitwear and woven products for brands and designers. They've started in 1983, so they have a long history with a diverse portfolio, but they really feel like the APEX is going to be key in terms of their future plans of minimizing sampling and really efficiently communicating designs with the brands that they work with. So they take on, as I mentioned, flat knit developments here. As you can see, they can offer different types of colorways and materials. They also have abilities to do woven simulations. And in addition, if you need product variations, such as different designs, as well as silhouette variations, they offer those virtually as well. And so they have a wide breadth of digitalization knowledge. So if you're interested in any kind of simulation help or things like that, be sure to reach out to DZ Group. So yeah, that was DZ Group from New York. And now we have Lucy. We have someone that you would like to share.
Yeah, so this is Suzanne. Suzanne graduated with a master's degree in fashion and society this year from Oslo Metropolitan University in Norway. She really interestingly, she wrote her thesis on new technology within the knitting industry. And she found that Shima Seiki software and machinery was a key player in that digitalization of the industry. These slides, you can see how she used the virtual sampling software to develop knitted garments in 3D and evaluate them for the pattern, knit structure, and jacquard. And she was able to compare these to the real samples that she knitted on the Shima Seiki knitting machine as well.
Beautiful.
Another company that we have in the UK is Johnston's of Elgin. Johnston's have been making luxury, high-quality designs for over 200 years now. Their products are made to last, and they're committed to continue reducing the environmental footprint of their products. They're doing this in a couple of ways. They're doing it by manufacturing within Scotland, so they've reshored production and using high-quality biodegradable fibres. Sorry, I said they'd reshored production. They've always manufactured in Scotland, but they're here in manufacturing where they are using high quality biodegradable fibres, using the latest technology the industry has to offer as well. So some of the technology they're using is the APEX design system. The APEX design system was brought into their business at Johnston's of Elgin as they identified areas in which it could increase efficiency and be more economical through time and cost savings during the sampling process. They have a skilled team of APEX users who create virtual samples for knitwear, woven garments, and accessories to aid the design and development process. The virtual samples are created in multiple colorways, and they use both these for sales meetings and as a selling tool. And it means that they've streamlined the design process, reducing sampling time and material waste. Because the samples are created virtually, it also gives the company the opportunity to trade the products virtually folded, or on an avatar, or on a mannequin, or on a hanger. For example, these woven scarves are usually photographed flat, but by using the APEX design system, multiple colorways can be displayed, showing how they look on the body, for example. One final company that I want to share with you within the UK is Poetic Gem. Poetic Gem established in 1995. They are a creative design and sourcing office in the UK and have a specialist knitwear team in Manchester. Like many design houses, they find that it often takes many iterations of samples before a garment can be put into production. But using the APEX design system to create photorealistic simulations of knitted garments, it makes it possible to share clear 3D images of the designs before the sample is made. By having a clear image of the garment, dressed as if it was on the model, means that the lead time is reduced and they can respond quickly to new trends within the market. So Hayatu, that's all from my side of here in Europe.
Great, thank you. I'm pretty sure a lot of people got a general understanding of how Poetic Gem, as well as Johnston Elgin, are using the APEX to digitize. Lastly, I have one video that I just want to showcase from our headquarters, as well as Hong Kong office, highlighting one customer over there that's using the APEX.
Kobo is one of the largest knitwear groups. Our team of knitwear specialists has been designing and making knitwear for more than 4 decades. Technology has been in the core of what we do. We continue to use latest digital technology and work with like-minded partners, namely Shima Seiki, to constantly redefine the knitwear industry. Apparel brands are trying hard to reduce development times, attempting to achieve speed-to-market efficiency via digital solutions. Our goal at Kobo is to create a digitalized ecosystem that automates the supply chain, from creativity all the way to the data port of the knitting machines, vastly shortening the development lead time for our customers. Traditional sampling takes 2 to 3 weeks with 2 to 3 rounds of iteration to achieve presentable sample for our customer. With the cutting-edge technology of Shima Seiki and our unparalleled digital ecosystem, we can turn around virtual sample within 24 hours to save costs on physical sampling, yarn, merchandising manpower, energy and water consumption, and more importantly, offering much more options for customers before they finalize their buys. Bearing in mind, industry first sample rejection rate is 90%.
APEX is a homegrown 3D design system of Shima Seiki. Through its extensive experience and know-how in the field of knitwear, APEX is a perfect tool for our global digital teams creating, simulating, and programming new products around the clock. APEX is the best tailor-made knitwear virtual sampling software worldwide. The most powerful tools are yarn scanning, stitch simulation, 2D mapping, and color variation. Virtual sampling not only accelerated our product development process and increased product offers to our customers without additional costs. The highly realistic simulation enabled responsive buying decision of our customers. They are able to visualize what they are planning to buy with more styles, color combinations, and reduce inventory risk through responsive replenishment. We also appreciate Shima providing professional after-sales service. Shima continues reinvents themselves in virtual sampling functions and always care about users' experience.
Whole garment is becoming more popular in the market. It's not just knitwear without seams. It's a revolution of the knitwear industry. It eliminates linking process, which is labor-intensive. Such automation makes production easier in any parts of the world, hence has the potential to change the industry landscape. We lack skillful linking workers, especially for finer gauges. It's often the bottleneck in production too. By eliminating the linking process, whole garment can enable us to shorten production lead time, reduce order quantity, support quick replenishment, and even remove geographical limitation when we import knitting data directly into machines around the world. It's a sustainable solution too, as it uses less yarn and reduce carbon footprint.
Digitalization, automation, and disruptive technologies are affecting every single sector of the economy, including our industry. Our goal at Kobo is to develop a fully digitized platform, integrating our partners along the supply chain, gathering a wealth of data insight, and putting our customer in control in terms of demand and production. Shima Seiki will continuously challenge themselves to develop innovative technology. We at Kobo and Shima Seiki will strategically cooperate business activity together and work on solving various issues in fashion industry for the future.
Yeah, so that was a Cobalt Fashion Group from Hong Kong. And they also mentioned a little bit about the whole garment as well, which we didn't really cover today, but I'm sure you have a general understanding of what the APEX kind of flow looks like today. Lastly, we'll just close off with a few closing updates and announcements from both USA side as well as the Europe side. And from USA, I'd like to just cover some past events that we've recently been involved with. We were at Tech Textile North America in Raleigh Convention Center late August. This time we focused on showcasing something we called Fur Knitture, where we highlighted knitted goods in the home goods sector. And we got a lot of attention on our SVR knitting machines with the eye plating capability. We also recently were at the Albanon and Motifs 3D Tech Festival. We spoke with a major US company on the topic of pivoting towards digitalization with the APEX. So if you did not join that session, they do have the video recording available on Albanon and Motif's website. So be sure to check that screen recording to see how one major US company is beginning to use APEX to digitize their designs. And as far as future and upcoming events, we'll be at WTIN's virtual panel discussion, which will be announced sometime in November. And then we also will be at the Physical Product Innovation Apparel event, PI Apparel, in New York. This is coming up in November 9th and 10th. Again, at the show, we'll be focused on showcasing the APEXFiz. So if you would like to learn more and are in the New York area during that time, definitely stop by to say hi and learn more about the APEX. For you, Lucy?
Yeah, thank you, Hayati. So for us, we've got a show coming up in London in November. And this is at Liberty House, London. We're just there to showcase the APEX design system, APEXFiz, and we'll be there to do demonstrations. It is by appointment only, so please let us know if you want to come to that, and we'll make sure that we get you booked in for a session. And then we also have Shima Seiki Scotland, the Scotland office, who is part of Shima Seiki Europe. They've recently opened a new office. So we're having an event there to showcase the latest machinery, as well as APEX Explorer and APEXFiz as well. That's coming up in early 2020. So I'm sure we'll announce that on our LinkedIn pages and social media. So please make sure to follow us for upcoming dates.
Perfect. Otherwise, there's one last update that I'd like to share before we close off the session. Our headquarters has a global webinar as well that's focused on the APEX. It's called the Fashion Tech Webinar Series. They have their session number 4 coming up later this month. Again, this will be kind of covering how to realize manufacturing without physical sampling. be sure to tune into Shima headquarters website to learn more about these webinar sessions. Otherwise, thank you all for joining in on this session today. If you have any information or questions, feel free to reach out to Shima Seiki Europe, Shima Seiki U.S.A. For further inquiries and questions. And without further ado, I'd like to go on and take on the chat section. And so, yes, thank you all. Thank you all for joining. I will stop the screen share. All right, so I'm going into the chat section. Thank you for joining in. And so we have a question here from Connie Huffa. She asked if, can you make your own modules for structure? I believe this is yes. And she was referring to the structure pattern section. You could go in and create individual structure patterns of your own, and then you could even register it into the library as a preset for your own. So that's one question. Second question, she mentioned, can the virtual be reverse engineered by Shima software rather than relying on technician to interpret the layout manually?
So I think with that, by using the Shima Seiki virtual sampling software and using it to create the 3D garments, I think it just gives a great starting point when you can take the basic programming data and then give that to the technician, who has then a great starting point.
Okay. And so I guess in terms of reverse engineering, there's two ways I think they could do it. One way, you could reference the image behind a blank swatch image and then begin to plug in your own library that is similar, and then can drag and drop and repeat as you need to kind of really recreate that structure. And that's really on the APEXFiz software side. But I believe if it was Apex 4, we also do have that AI function. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
so
I think we did. Yeah.
You also have an AI function on the Apex 4 side where you can plug in your own image, and it would the Apex would pull up relevant kind of structures that can be found in that image. So,
yeah, that's exactly right, Hayati. Yeah.
So that's another tool. It's not offered on the APEXFiz, I believe. So if you're interested in that function, it might be only on the Apex 4. Okay, yeah, thank you as well, Connie. I think we'll stick around for one more minute to see if anyone else has questions, but otherwise, again, thank you all for joining in on this session. I hope it was informative. Please be sure to stick around. We have a survey pop-up at the end. So yeah, thank you all for joining in on today's session. Thank you as well, Lucy. I know it's getting late on your end, so yeah.
All right, thank you, Hayatu. It's been great. Thank you very much.
All right. Yes. Thank you all for joining, and please stay tuned for upcoming events, and we hope to see you all soon again. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.